Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, a monster. Next 72 hours for this program on the recruiting trail. I'm going to start this episode off with this. Florida currently sits with the 16th best class in the country. Over the next 72 hours, if Florida does what they're supposed to do on the recruiting trail by Sunday dinner, we're going to be talking about a class that's in the top 10. Now, are all the pieces going to fall in the right way for Florida? That's what we're about to go find out. We're going to preview some of the most important names set to make some decisions over the next couple of days. But I want to start with this. Hey, where does Florida sit right now? And this is what I would really emphasize to the Florida fans. Hey, 16th best class in the country. That's not necessarily the standard at Florida when it comes to talent acquisition. An average commitment of 91. In terms of the player that's committed to Florida in the 2026 cycle, that's a 91 grade. That is higher than a team like Michigan that's in the top 10. That is higher than a team like Texas that's ahead of Florida. That's higher than a team like Penn State that's ahead of Florida. So, although Florida has a lighter number of commitments in the fold right now with only 16, Florida's bringing in some very quality football players, 11 blue chips to only 5 non-blue chip guys. That is a ratio that you like to see with Florida. And I'll say this, even the guys who are not blue chips in this class, you trust this coaching staff. This coaching staff been really dang good at evaluating some of those diamonds in the rough. The 3 stars that Florida has brought in over the last couple of years, they've turned out to be some of the better players on this Florida Gators roster. The second thing I'll start with here is I think Florida's shown great discipline. Especially in this era of college football, especially on the recruiting trail, where there's a lot of numbers getting thrown around and these teams try to stick to their process. Hey, they got a plan as they enter the 2026 cycle. And when numbers start to get thrown around and the bullets start to get flying a little bit, it's really easy to see these teams get out of their process. I think the best example was a guy like Trenton Henderson. Florida knocked it out of the park with the recruitment of Trenton Henderson. All signs were that Trenton Henderson was going to be committed to Florida. Hey, LSU comes in late, a significant NIL package. Would have been really easy for Florida to match what LSU did and go out and land the commitment of Trenton Henderson. But what did Florida do? Was saying, hey, Kendall Gerville, that is although Trenton Henderson's a 5-star prospect, a quote unquote better prospect according to the recruiting services, Florida recognized, hey, we don't care about the rankings as much as building this roster the right way. We're going to allocate those resources to Kendall Gerville. We'll let Trenton Henderson walk to LSU. We're going to go get a player that's more important for us to get in the 2026 cycle. Now, that doesn't result in a higher recruiting ranking, but it was certainly, at least in my opinion, my humble opinion in my basement in Rochester, New York, I thought it was the better move for Florida when it comes to talent building. And then they have some pivot plays. And that's probably where we're going to start. Now, before we do, and as always, the Florida fans, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been a really fun summer talking this team on the recruiting trail, breaking down the commitments. The amount of support that y'all have shown the fellas has been amazing. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Now, without further ado, let's focus in on, hey, who are the names that we have to track over the next couple of days? I do want to start with one more thing I have in my notepad right here. With 16 commitments in the fold, I would expect that number to get to around 20, maybe 21, maybe 2020, or maybe 22 as Florida rolls into the fall. What I do expect Florida to do here, and I think this would be a really, really good idea, leave some spots open. We've talked about it throughout the summer, and we saw this happen in the 2025 class. If this Florida team goes out and plays the way that a lot of Florida fans, and I'm sure Billy Napier, expects to play, and I'm talking about, I know they got a brutal schedule. I'm talking about 9-3, 10-2 college football playoff team. That's the expectations with the roster that Florida has. Leave some spots open, because if you go out and do that on the football field, very similar to what we saw in the 2025 cycle, I think Florida is going to become a very attractive destination for a lot of these football players that Florida has built relationships with. And guess what? Guess what also follows winning? Money. And if this fan base and these boosters start seeing Billy Napier turn the corner on the football field, there's going to be some money that's getting injected into this Florida Gators roster. And so you want to go close on the guys that are still on your board, but also leave some spots open and see what it looks like come November and December, because gosh darn it, if this team wins on the football field, they're going to get that spatula out, very similar to what you saw in the 2025 cycle. Now let's get into the guys that we got to close on. By far the number one target heading into the weekend, KJ Ford. This kid freaking rocks, by the way, and fair to say it's been a frustrating class recruiting these edge rushers, right? Yeah, Trent Henderson trending to Florida. LSU comes in late. Hey, Jake Cruel, a guy that we thought Florida had a really good shot at. They didn't make his top three. KJ Ford, really, really good football player from Duncanville, Texas. Now, what I love the most about KJ Ford is he brings everything you want as an edge rusher. You know, in some cases, some of the other players didn't. KJ Ford, his ability to win with first step and winning on the outside shoulder of offensive tackles with his burst and bend, it's certainly there. Also, really powerful kid that can hold up in the run game and also just go right through tackles. When you have the ability to win, with burst and bend, but also with speed to power, it gives tackles absolute fits. And I think that's what KJ Ford is. He's a all-around very, very good edge rusher that's capable of doing a lot of things. Here's the other thing. You go and play early. Similar to how we talked about Jay Cruel, I think KJ Ford's a guy that he commits to Florida. You're probably going to see him in the two deep as a freshman in the 2026 season, which I think is something that Florida probably values here, especially when it comes to defensive linemen. Tyreek Sapp's going to the NFL. Caleb Banks is going to the NFL. We got to make sure we have some guys that are coming in that can provide immediate production and immediate depth to this roster. KJ Ford coming from Duncanville, Texas, one of the best high school programs in the country. You know that he's going to provide that for Florida. It's the DJ Lagway effect, man. Like, DJ Lagway was, I don't know if it's fair to say, a legend in the state of Texas, but he's a pretty damn big name in the state of Texas at the high school ranks. DJ Lagway paving his way at Florida and creating as much buzz as he's created, I think, is opening the door for a lot of these other studs in the state of Texas to say, hey, Gainesville, Florida, that's an option for me in the state of Texas. KJ Ford coming in at number one. Number two, Heze Kent or Caden Prothro, both committing this weekend, and it sounds like Heze Kent's the top target. Caden Prothro, I think Florida's on the outside looking in now. Y'all know how I feel about Heze Kent. Let's talk about him as a tight end first. Actually, let's talk about him as an athlete first. That's probably where you got to start. Talking 6'5 plus, 310 plus. The way this kid moves, you're betting on that kind of athlete every day. And I know he wants to play tight end. I personally think that's kind of a funky fit. I think he should just be an offensive tackle and be a dang good one. But hey, what do I know sitting in my basement? You're betting on this athlete every day of the week. And at the very least, he's going to be a red zone threat, and he's going to be a hammer as an inline blocker. And as much as we know Florida wants to run the football, run 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field, and run the football at you, this is like a 6 offensive lineman on the football field that does give you some juice as a pass catcher as well. Really good athlete. I think a unique fit in this Florida offense, and has been a guy that Florida has prioritized for the last couple of months. Last one on the list that I could see committing to Florida this weekend, DQ Forkpa. Yeah, sounds like a Florida State battle here. Speed and space is probably the best way to describe him. Malik Morris is that first and second down. Malik Morris is like a Jaden Robinson, in my opinion. Like, I'm going to be a freaking hammer against the run. I'm going to take on blocks. I'm going to stack blocks. I'm going to shed blocks, and I'm going to be violent between the box, especially supporting the run. DQ Forkpa, put together kid. Like, not a lot of bad weight on his frame. Little bit more of an athlete, little bit more speed and space, little bit sideline to sideline. I'll say this, Malik Morris, DQ Forkpa, feel good about that linebacker class. And then you have a guy like Isaiah Williams, who I just feel like Florida's probably the place he wants to be. Now, I don't know if you necessarily want to land his commitment anytime soon. He's probably a guy that you want to land his commitment on signing day. Don't give him a chance to go flip to another school. Isaiah Williams, I know he's a polarizing name for a lot of Florida fans, and I get it. He's a really good football player, and I think Florida knows that. Now, some other names to monitor, at least in my opinion. I think Florida's got a sneaky good shot at Braylon Womack. Valden Sohn is the upside is so much. Now, the thing with Valden Sohn is I think Florida's looking for guys who, especially when you took a guy like Jarrell and McCoy, who I think's a slow burn, he's going to need 2 to 3 years before he's ready to play. Maybe you want to prioritize a different defensive lineman that's a little bit more day one ready. He's a really good football player that has massive upside. Samori and Wingo kind of rounding out that wide receiver room would be good. Look, Florida, there's a very real chance that Florida enters the season with a top 10 class in the country. If you can do that, just be in the top 10 as you enter the season, then go win a bunch of football games in the 2025 year, continue the momentum that you created in the 2024 class, you can see Florida comfortably, signing a top 8 and maybe knocking on the door of a top 5 class in the country if you start getting the spatula out late for Florida. Big weekend coming up, kind of sets Florida up and kind of puts the cap on a really busy summer for the Florida Gators in terms of commitments. You roll into the season with a top 10 class, very good chance Florida can build on that when it comes to signing day in November. We'll break down the commitments as they come in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.